Let's jump right into it. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're completely reframing the Majjhimapaṇṇāsa. Now, you probably know it as a 2,500-year-old Buddhist text, specifically the middle-length Discourses. But we're going to look at it through a totally different lens. Forget about viewing it as a dogmatic religious sermon. Instead, we're exploring it as a revolutionary intellectual laboratory. This text perfectly captures the intense collision of philosophies, beliefs, and power structures of ancient India. And honestly, the insights it holds are wildly relevant to us right now.
You know, it's really easy to look at ancient history and just assume it's entirely disconnected from our modern lives. But seriously, how can a compilation of 50 ancient discourses tackle highly contemporary issues like pragmatism, political science, and systemic inequality? Well, as we dive into the source text, we're going to see that human nature, power dynamics, and societal struggles haven't actually changed all that much in 2.5 millennia.
So, to find out exactly how this text pulls that off, here is our agenda for today. First, we'll look at the ancient thought laboratory, then move into pragmatism and practical psychology, explore the Great Intellectual Debate Festival, examine political science and power critique, witness the dismantling of the caste system, and finally, see how it serves as a wisdom map for the modern world.
All right, moving right along to Section 1, the Ancient Thought Laboratory.
To really understand the genius of this text, we have to look at its structural design. It's divided into 5 main chapters, or vagas. We've got sections dedicated to householders, monks, wanderers, which essentially means rival philosophers, kings, and Brahmins. This 5-part structure is a brilliant illustration of the Buddha's strategic communication. He perfectly tailored his teachings to the distinct social statuses and intellects of his listeners. There was absolutely no one-size-fits-all approach here. Whether he was talking to a wealthy merchant, a powerful monarch, or an intellectual rival, he calibrated his logic, his tone, and his metaphors to meet them exactly where they were.
Let's get into Section 2, Pragmatism and Practical Psychology.
This pragmatism is captured so beautifully in the famous poisoned arrow analogy from the Kula-Mallyonavada Sutta. Picture this. A monk demanded to know the answers to these incredibly deep metaphysical questions. Is the universe eternal? What exactly happens after we die? The Buddha responded by comparing him to a man shot with a poisoned arrow, who absolutely refuses medical treatment until he knows the name, clan, and height of the person who shot him. The guy would literally die before getting the answers. Rather than obsessively debating unprovable metaphysics, the text argues that we have to urgently focus on practical actions to stop our immediate suffering. It's pretty much the ultimate example of philosophical pragmatism.
And this philosophy translates directly into a highly actionable psychological framework. In the Maharolavada Sutta, the Buddha teaches his own son Rahula a very specific psychological method. Instead of handing him vague theories, he provides exact steps. Observe the body simply as biological elements, practice mindful breathing, and systematically dismantle the human ego and attachment. It's fascinating because today, cognitive behavioral therapists and psychologists utilize incredibly similar mindfulness frameworks to help patients detach from anxiety and chronic distress. Talk about being ahead of the curve.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Great Intellectual Debate Festival.
In the Paribhajaka, we enter what was essentially ancient India's vibrant debate fest. During these debates, rival philosophers would constantly try to trap the Buddha with complex logical fallacies. Take a second to really think about this logic puzzle from the Ajivacchagata Sutta. A philosopher asked the Buddha what happens to an enlightened person after they die. Do they exist, or do they not exist? It's a classic trap. But the Buddha countered with a question of his own. He asked, when a fire goes out, which direction does it go? North, south, east, or west?
It is such an elegant way to solve an impossible metaphysical debate, because the answer to the fire question is, obviously, that the question itself is flawed. A fire doesn't go anywhere, it just ceases because its fuel is exhausted. The text uses this to show that once the human fuel of craving and attachment is gone, the standard linguistic framework of existence or non-existence simply doesn't apply anymore. It is a masterclass in high-level logical deconstruction.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Political Science and Power Critique. Here in the Rajavaga, which modern scholars actually view as a cornerstone for early political science, we get a very stark reality check. In the Rathapala Sutta, a monk speaks directly to King Kauravya, who was one of the most powerful men in the region. Now, instead of flattering the king, he lays out 4 brutal realities. He says the world is fundamentally unstable, ultimate ownership is just a myth, all humans are slaves to their cravings, and therefore state power and material wealth are inherently insecure. It is a profound political critique. He is exposing the fragility of authoritarian power directly to the authority figure himself.
This clash of ideologies is incredibly clear in the story of Angulimala. Now, Angulimala was a ruthless, feared serial killer. The state, led by King Pasenadi, wanted to handle him the usual way, through violent punishment and military force. But the Buddha approached him through psychological intervention, which led to Angulimala's complete internal transformation and rehabilitation into a peaceful monk. This story fundamentally challenged the state-centric idea of punitive justice. It proved that internal rehabilitation holds vastly more power to change human behavior than a state's threat of violence. And that's a fact that even the king ultimately had to bow to and respect.
Okay, moving into Section 5, dismantling the caste system.
We are now entering what is perhaps the most radically progressive part of the text, focusing on equality and dignity. The Buddha used pure empirical observation to destroy the ruling class's justification for inequality. In the Asalayana Sutta, the elite Brahmin class argued they were divinely superior because, according to their myth, they were born from the mouth of the god Brahma. Well, the Buddha countered this with stark biological reality. He simply pointed out that Brahmin women get pregnant, give birth, and nurse their children just like women of any other caste. By pointing directly to the biological reality of a mother's womb, he completely debunked the divine origin myth used to justify systemic inequality.
And this idea is driven home by a really powerful declaration from the Vasetha Sutta. The text observes that while different species of animals or plants have distinct biological markers separating them, human beings do not. We all share the exact same biology. Guys, this was an incredible paradigm shift for its time. Over 2 millennia before modern genetics or human rights declarations, this text laid the earliest ideological foundation for universal human equality. It boldly argued that a person's worth is defined solely by their actions, not their birth.
Finally, we reach Section 6, a wisdom map for the modern world.
Let's look at the contemporary applications of this ancient intellectual laboratory. Today, major universities and institutions aren't just studying this as a piece of history. They are actively applying these exact same 2,500-year-old frameworks. Insights on power dynamics are used in public administration and corporate management. The practical techniques for dismantling ego are foundational to modern psychological therapeutics, and its logical, open debate format serves as a prime model for interfaith dialogue. The text remains an absolute masterclass in addressing inequality, state violence, and the human search for meaning.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We so often look to future technologies or brand new political systems to save us from our societal issues. But an ancient intellectual laboratory already mapped out the core solutions to the abuses of power, systemic inequality, and psychological suffering 2,500 years ago. The map has been drawn and the logic has been proven. The real question is, are we actually willing to walk the path? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me today. Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.